Let's preview tonight's Spurs Grizzlies game. Get into what LMA had to say about Kawhi Leonard leaving San Antonio, and should Keldon stay off the bench?
You are Locked On Spurs, your daily San Antonio Spurs podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Hot Rod.
And I'm RC from the San Antonio Spurs.
And you're listening to Locked On Spurs with Jeff Garcia.
Welcome back to Locked On Spurs, right here on the Locked On NBA Network. I'm your host, Jeff Garcia, Spurs writer for Ken's 5 San Antonio. Glad to have you back. Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to the first Locked On Spurs of the year 2024. Glad to have you back. You guys are the everydayers. We appreciate you subscribing each and every day on the YouTube page, Ken's 5 Plus app, iTunes, Spotify, the list goes on and on. We thank you. Hey, what are we talking about today? We're going to be looking at tonight's game, Spurs Grizzlies, first game of the year 2024 for your Spurs. A quick preview. Then we're going to bring in our guest, Casey Viera, my colleague at Ken's 5. We're going to discuss LMA's recent comments about why he thought Kawhi Leonard left the Spurs, and then ask the question if Keldon should remain off the bench moving forward pretty much for the rest of the season. Just a quick heads up, he could not do a video. He can only do audio. He has dad duty, so he was not in the greatest moment, for video ready. Let's put it that way. But nevertheless, he's going to be doing an audio-only segment in just a few minutes. This episode was brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for first deposit match up to $100. Your Spurs and Grizzlies get things going in the year 2024. Let's look at some things you got to watch out for and a quick preview of tonight's game. All right, so let's go ahead and preview tonight's Spurs-Grizzlies game. Your Spurs are coming off a home loss to the Boston Celtics, losing 134-101. Wemby watch, he had 21.7 rebounds, Sohan had 9 points and 3 rebounds. Devin Vassell had 22 points, and Malachi Branham, he added 11 points. Dominic Barlow added 8. Keldon Johnson and Zach Collins did not play in that game. Spurs fell to 5-27 and are taking on the Grizzlies tonight. For those that are on uniform watch, the Spurs will be in their Icon Edition jerseys. So, there you have it. Injury watch, obviously, Bassey's out. Zach Collins will be out. By the way, Pop did say that Collins will be out for 2 to 4 weeks, so he'll be gone for a while. Keldon Johnson is probable, so he'll likely start, or at least come off the bench. We'll talk about that later, right here on Locked On Spurs. What are we looking at? Well, the Grizzlies have won 11 straight against San Antonio. So not only the Spurs are on a overall losing skid, they have a personal team-to-team losing skid versus Memphis Grizzlies, 11 straight losses to Memphis. So hopefully the Spurs can snap that losing streak as well. Now, Ja Morant is back after serving that suspension to start the season, and not good news for the Spurs if he does play. He's averaged 28.7 points per game, 7.1 assists, 4.8 rebounds in 12 games against the Spurs in his career. So he will definitely be a handful for your Spurs. Desmond Bane, another Spurs killer. He's averaging 17 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, 3.5 assists in 12 career games versus the Spurs. So that 1-2 punch right there for the Grizzlies tend to be a problem for the San Antonio Spurs. Now, look at the Spurs side of things. The Spurs on the road are 3-9 against Western Conference teams this season, so below 500. And the Spurs got their work cut out for them. And finally, keep an eye on the scoreboard after the third period. If the Spurs are up in Memphis on the Grizzlies, they're undefeated. They're 2-0 on the road whenever they're leading after the third period. So that'll definitely bode well for the Spurs. Hopefully that'll be a sign that the Spurs can get a W out in Memphis. That is your very quick Spurs Grizzlies preview. Coming up next, we have Casey Viera, my colleague at Ken's 5. He's going to be joining me to talk about LMA's recent comments regarding why Kawhi Leonard left. And then we're going to ask a bigger question. Should Keldon just stay on the bench for the rest of the season? Why or why not? That is coming up next on Locked On Spurs. But before we bring on Casey, I want to talk to you about PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and it is the largest. They're the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, and it's you just against the numbers. That's it. You don't have to worry about the sharks, the pros, what have you. It's just you versus the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can just start watching the winnings roll in. Look, PrizePicks is the most fun you'll ever have. You can probably win up to 25 times your money this basketball season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less of projected stats, and place your entry. Simple as that. Look, they have quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, numerous selection of players, and stat types that are, well, they make PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. PrizePicks now offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposit into your account this basketball season. What more do you need to have to push you and get you to go and download the PrizePicks app? Go get the PrizePicks app right now. I have it. You should get it too. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. That's where you want to go to. Use code LockedOnNBA to get a first deposit match up to $100. That's PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. The code is LockedOnNBA, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. And we are now joined by my colleague at Ken's 5. He is Casey Viera. Make sure to follow him on X, I should say, at Casey_Viera. He's living that dad life. How's it treating you?
It is a beautiful yet challenging thing, but I love it.
I bet you do. Is Mr. Carter giving you any issues or not? He's just being a baby right now.
Oh, he's the best baby of all babies. It has been nothing short of perfect. Perfect, just everything beyond perfection. No hiccups whatsoever.
Awesome. All right. Wait till he turns a teenager, then we'll see how that changes. But
yeah,
you still got a few more years for that to happen. But all right. Congratulations to Casey and his wife and their newborn baby boy, Mr. Carter Viera.
Mr. Carter. One and only.
One and only. All right. What are we talking about with Casey? We're going to be looking at Keldon Johnson, whether or not he should stay on the bench or not. But we're going to kick things off with an oldie but goodie. The one that always gets Spurs fans riled up, and that is Kawhi Leonard. Yes, I get it. Before y'all start, we know it's old news. We know he's not a Spur anymore. I get water under the bridge. Fine. We've heard it before. But why he exited the Spurs, what happened, still talked about among Spurs fans. Well, a former Spur, LaMarcus Aldridge, brought it up during a chat with Matt Barnes on the All the Smoke podcast. In a nutshell, everybody, LMA said, right? I want to make that very clear, Casey. Okay, LMA said, not Steven Jackson. Clear. Yeah, not Matt Barnes. LaMarcus Aldridge said, in a nutshell, 2 things. One, that all that Kawhi Leonard wanted to do was just play basketball in San Antonio. And 2, that in his opinion, he believes that Popovich's off-the-court, worldwide, real-life teachings, from learning books and maps, and as LMA said, like learning about, let's talk about the politics of Africa, that Kawhi wasn't into that, and that contributed to why Kawhi exited. Casey, you talked to me about this before, or late last week, and you said that the more little crumbs come out, the more it's making the Spurs look bad. Why did you react that way to this go-around from LMA's thoughts?
Maybe not as far as look bad.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not as far as look bad, but kind of a bit of a devil's advocate sense. I think that's a little bit way to phrase it. And that's what I took out of what Aldridge said here, is that a lot of Pop's ways, the intricacies, things that make him eccentric, that didn't reach Kawhi. And from that standpoint, if you're a player playing for him and that's not hitting with you, you're like, okay, well, maybe this isn't for me. Mm-hmm. And from that devil's advocate standpoint, I can kind of understand Kawhi a little bit more. And I don't think that's beyond reason for him to feel that way, because I just don't think that's beyond reason for anybody to feel that way in what they do. You go to work, you don't like what your boss is, you don't like what the boss has got preaching going on, or the way things operate. It's a little bit different in the NBA because you're under contract, and most jobs you can't just, it's not like most jobs where you can just get up and leave, but it's not super foreign to see in this case, to level it down to the bare minimum, see an employee not be super thrilled with the way their boss and the culture around them is doing what they do. And I think that's okay because Kawhi's not the first, not going to be the last. And I think if you talk to most Spurs fans about that, especially as time's gone on, they've realized that, hey, things have become a little bit of an imperfect science, a little bit different than years past, the way we viewed things. And we can understand a devil's advocacy sense, so to speak, of someone not entirely being understanding for the Spurs culture. And I think a good number of fans, I don't speak for a lot, but a lot understand that side of things. Now, that doesn't mean you necessarily put Kawhi off the hook for handling it the way that he did, which he did not handle well. And I think kind of, and years later now, I mean, however, coming up on 5 years later since this all went down, I kind of go back to the same feeling I felt all the way around, is that if Kawhi bounced at the end of his deal, or even not on the terms that he did, just didn't want to re-sign, I think the perception still is different. You know, you're still going to have your people who feel betrayed one way or another, just the fact that he didn't say, because, you know, they're Spurs fans and Spurs can do no wrong in their book and anything, and it's how dare you don't want to be a part of the San Antonio Spurs culture. But most fans, I feel like, and are certainly within reason of looking at his exit and everything that went about it and saying, yeah, that was a pretty lousy way to do what you did. And it was. Yeah, exactly. But on the other side of the spectrum, it's kind of like, okay, well, it's not really resonating for me, and saying this in his shoes, it's not really resonating for me anymore. I want out. And I get that. But having this ultimately play out the way it did with an injury and all the whatever show, I guess you want to put around that at the end, is that even the word we use for it anymore? Yeah.
Well, what got me about this is, you know, perhaps a lesson learned for the Spurs moving forward with star players. Look, you've said it before. I've said it. I think everybody knows. You got to have top quality, upper crust players, all stars or beyond, on your roster to make an impact on the NBA. Kawhi was that, and perhaps sometimes, you know, the Spurs way isn't for everybody. So perhaps this is a lesson for them to be more flexible rather than inflexible. What do you think about that?
Kawhi was something that they were foreign to for basically 20 years, of a guy of a superstar caliber not necessarily buying into what the culture was anymore, and having a valid ground to stand on at the end of it in many respects. And it goes to show you how valid it was, because after he was dealt, he ended up doing his own thing away from Spurs culture and won a championship in Toronto. That whole concept idea is, and especially at the time, was extremely foreign to the Spurs, and understandably so. How could it not be? You've known 20 plus years of success. God, how dare somebody come in here irritated to the point that they don't want to be here? You know, you kind of see that side of things at the time, and you're probably, if you're the Spurs or you're looking at it in the Spurs lens, you're valid in feeling the way that you do. But yeah, I think there's definitely a case, because the Spurs haven't had a player as good as Kawhi since, with the exception of what they currently have, of course, in Victor right now. And I think what it comes down to is that it's a tough learning experience to kind of have, I guess. But the reality is, we're in a league where like you said, superstars win. It's a player-driven league, and you need superstars to win. And more often than not, you're going to have to appease to your guys. And it's not, you're going to have to appease to your guys, even if you don't necessarily agree with it. Now, sometimes it works, other times it doesn't. In Brooklyn, they appeased to their guys, and this time last year, and it bombed with Durant and Kyrie and Harden and all those guys. And sometimes it bombs, it doesn't work. But your best path to contention, unless you're drafting to the point that you don't even need to worry about that, is to appease to your superstars. And it's something I think 7, or probably be closer to after the extension because they can get a 5-year. So that'd be 9 years down the road. So we have a ways to go as it pertains to Victor before he hits the unrestricted free agent market. So even this conversation will be dated by the time it actually happened. But the general concept being, and that may not have been there before, is that there's a level of needing to appease the star that might not have been there before with Kawhi.
Mm-hmm.
But where are we 9 years from now? That's 2032, right? And
Yeah.
Kawhi Kawhi happened in 20. So that would have been 13 years between the two.
Yeah.
If you're not growing and learning in 13 years, I don't know what to tell you at that point.
And you look at this whole thing, and you know what LMA had to say. What was interesting though is Matt Barnes brought up about Tony Parker and his public comments regarding his injury and how the severity of it was bigger than Kawhi's, and it was a similar injury. And even Steven Jackson to chime in and, you know, kind of throw gas on the fire by saying, oh, you know, that in his opinion, he felt the Spurs didn't have Kawhi's back when that happened, that Kawhi was quiet when Tony Parker was out. But I found it very interesting was LMA's reaction to that. He didn't want any part of that conversation. He deflected. He started talking about a painting on the wall. He laughed, and he kind of kept it quiet. In my opinion, I took that as he was all but saying, yeah, that may have been a part of it.
He's a professional who doesn't want to burn bridges with an organization that largely did him very well. That's what I take out of that. And for better or worse, that might be there. That all those things you said might have happened. There's a real in terms of the stuff they asked him about and whether that was a determining factor. I mean, he knows better than anyone as to whether or not what's the truth and what's not. It's a no-win. It's a no-win scenario there for LaMarcus, but at the same time, it's kind of one of those deals where the silence is telling enough, unless he says as bluntly as, no, that wasn't the case. It wasn't the case at all.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a no-win situation.
Yeah,
it's a no-win.
His body language was just so interesting because he kind of like, oh, yeah. So what's going on, everybody? And even Matt Barnes and Matt Barnes even said it, saying, look at LaMarcus, look at his big smile on his face. It's like they struck a nerve. And again, LMA did not deny, he did not confirm, the whole TP thing, but your guys are smart. You can watch the video. You can see LMA's reaction. It was almost as if he was kind of saying, yeah, they may have played a part in it. All in all, look, again, why we're talking about this is because of how it was handled. The Spurs didn't really allow anybody to talk to Kawhi Leonard towards that last hurrah with him in Spurs uniform. It was like an iron curtain came down. Nobody ever got the full story. So when we hear pieces like this, and this is just reminding us of a chapter in Spurs history where things went wrong, and I don't see any issue with bringing up Kawhi and what happened in San Antonio, because lessons learned. Is a new era of players, and players sometimes don't want to learn about world history or architecture. They just want to hoop.
Right.
And that's what at least LMA believes that what happened.
Right. And it's true. It just seems it was just so taboo at the time for someone of that standard caliber to not be sold on the Spurs system. And in hindsight, like you said, now that time has gone on, 5 years has gone on, you and the more things have come out, you do understand that microscope a little bit more, given the way things have just kind of played out in time. But I'll tell you on both sides. Well, I don't want to speak for Kawhi because Kawhi lives on planet Kawhi.
He does.
But normal rational humans, I think they would both tell you on both sides. Neither handled it particularly great. From an unbiased third party like me on the outside, Kawhi didn't handle it great, but it wasn't exactly handled particularly great on the other side, because the last thing you need is your star player, as it pertains to Tony Parker, having him sound off the way that he did, saying, okay, well, I was okay. Where is he? I mean, that's not handled particularly well on the Spurs side of things. Both sides will tell you, I'm sure, that it wasn't handled the way it should have been, but it was a unique circumstance. And like you said, it's a closed chapter now.
I mean, look, I don't want to put words or read more into what LMA reaction was, but his reaction to the TP topic was very telling, Casey.
You also have to remember, too, well, I don't think he wants to burn a bridge, LaMarcus, and I don't think that he particularly did in this interview. I don't think, there were certain things that you look at a little bit suspect, but I think everyone is too grown at this point on both sides to understand what it is. But LaMarcus didn't, while I think things ended cordially, there was a very much a time where it was not looking good for LaMarcus Aldridge in San Antonio.
Yeah.
And there were very frequent times where sometimes to his fault, other times to no fault of his own, it looked like his time here was ending. I mean, he reportedly said it just as much to Pop himself and management himself. Like, guys, I'm good. Thank you. Get me out of here. I think LaMarcus, in many respects, is probably a good person to have that conversation with, to talk about the subject matter, because he can view it through a lens of someone who was not buying into the Spurs system and Spurs culture and not buy into what it was all about. I think he's a good person to talk to from that lens. I think he's a good person to listen to from the lens of, hey, we figured it out a little bit. He's a good person to talk to in the lens of what it's like when this team is winning. He has very different, varying perspectives of what you could offer here. And I think there's a level of credibility to what he says, for better or worse, and the mannerisms and the things that he says, for better or worse, just based off what he's experienced, he's experienced alone. But for the most part, I thought everything that he was said, the way he handled everything in that, I don't think there was anything in there that could lead to a further point of contention between and management or anything. I thought everything he said was fair.
Yeah. And then you look at how he started that conversation. Again, to show everybody, especially the fans who say, oh, journalists don't ever get anything out of the Spurs. You guys go into those conference rooms and you don't ask the tough questions. Even LMA all but said, Casey, that even the players had no idea what was going on. I mean, that's how much of a vault it is in there. If you go back and watch that video, he literally said it. He goes, we didn't know what was going on. So if the players themselves didn't know what was going on, yeah, that just tells you how much of a vault the Spurs can be. But listen, I get it, everybody. It's water under the bridge. We're years removed. We're going to hear it, Casey. Oh, you guys are talking about this. Let it go. They're going to play the Frozen meme to us right now. Let it go, with the little girl spinning in the ground. But again, it gives us a glimpse into history of the Spurs and one of the quote-unquote darker periods in the franchise history. Hey, when we get back, we're going to continue our chat with Casey Viera. We're going to be discussing Keldon Johnson and whether or not he should and will stay as a reserve six-man moving forward this season. That's coming up next on Locked On Spurs.
Hey, this is Chris Sabat, and you're listening to Locked On Spurs with Jeff Garcia.
But first, I want to talk to you about FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed, when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. How about that? The app is easy to use. There are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and so much more. Look, this app is easy to use, very user-friendly, keeps you going throughout the regular season of the NFL and the NBA. Whatever it is, now's the time to get in on the NFL season because it's winding down and you're going to have a lot of fun with it using the FanDuel app. You want to visit FanDuel.com/lockedon right now to make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
This is Zach Aguilar, the voice of Tanjiro Kamado, and you're listening to Locked On Spurs with Jeff Garcia.
And we're back on Locked On Spurs with Casey Viera. Follow him on X at Casey_Viera. By the way, Casey, little Locked On Spurs history. You are the first guest in the year 2024.
I am flattered. Thank you. I appreciate you doing this. Our years of friendship, I knew something important would come of it.
Keldon Johnson, he has a new role, and it's been sustained in the last handful of games. He is now coming off the bench. Do you think this will continue to close out the season? Should the Spurs go with that? Will the Spurs do it? Or is this one of those experimental things we've been seeing throughout the season?
Well, that's a broad question. It's worked out okay. And I think in theory, man, I feel like I say in theory a lot with this team. But in theory, the way they have it thought out kind of makes sense, because it feels like when you're having Keldon, Vassell, Wembanyama all on the floor to start the game at once, there's too many cooks in the kitchen happening. And too many guys need the ball in their hands at one time. And that bench is left pretty thin with just about nothing to really go with in terms of guys who can create their own shot. You got the likes of McDermott and Osman, spot-up guys. I know Trey Jones is your point guard, but he largely can't create his own shot. Putting Keldon in that second unit, and I know a lot of people were kind of asking for a while, so I know they're happy with it too. But putting Keldon in that second unit, I think it does a good job spacing things out, that you're not overloaded with Vassell and Wemby in that first bunch. But it also frees up Keldon to be a little bit more aggressive and find his shot and create for himself, and be at times, at least when that full five, when they do finally check in at the same time, be the offensive catalyst, and that could help it. And at this point, you talk about experimenting. I think everything's on the table, including that, including to see if something like this works, has longevity to it. I certainly think it's worth trying. And if it stays, stick with it. Stick with it. I think a little bit you're digging so hard to this season, I know, to try to find the positives when you can. But I think a level of finding something there, the little things that work. They've done two of those things well over the past 3 weeks. It hasn't produced through a whole lot of wins, but it's produced a better looking basketball on the floor for the most part. Moving Victor to the center spot and Collins to the bench, and moving Keldon to the bench as their sixth man. I think those are two things that they have to stick with the rest of the way.
Yeah, I'm right there with you as well. You have Keldon Johnson, who's just so ball dominant, and you can't have that many ball dominant players to start, at least in the unit. And we saw that. And the good news is that Keldon is still getting his numbers. He's still putting up 20 points or more. We've seen that throughout his new role as far as coming off that bench. Zach Collins said pregame versus Portland that he and Keldon don't have any issues coming off. And look, I get it. What else are they going to say? They're not going to say, hell, we should be starters. But at least that they understand that as far as this season, if they want to get wins, then you're going to have to sacrifice. And so far, Keldon and Zach have done that. But no, I think this is a good role for KJ. I mean, he's one expensive six man, isn't he? He's the highest paid Spur on the roster, Casey.
Yeah. But I mean, the good thing is that contract is descending, and you're going to think about it as literally the highest paid guy. Yeah, that is a pricey six man. But in the grand scheme of things, it's still a pretty good contract.
Yeah, it is.
Grand scheme of things. I also think another thing too. I think another thing too is that, mind you, I'm not a player, so it's probably easy for me to say. Right. I do not play for the Spurs, nor will I ever come anything remotely close at this stage at 34 years old. But if I'm a player, I'm not as highly concerned as starting coming off the bench as I am to consistency in my minutes. If I'm going to play 30 minutes, whether I'm in the starting lineup or I'm on the bench, I'm still getting my time. If I'm told I'm going to play 30 minutes, I don't care where I'm getting it, as long as I'm getting my 30 minutes. And I don't know what his perception will be with that. But if he's on the floor getting that time right now where he is, and given that the fact the team is, as of this recording, a 4-win basketball team, you would think, in theory, that as long as his minutes are there and he's being put in a position where he can get his touches and hopefully be to the betterment of the team, I think that would be a thing that would check out with him all right on his end. You know, I know there's such a sexier claim to the title of saying you start. How many guys start in this league and play 15 minutes and just go on the bench to help sort out the rotations? You know, Thabo Cephalosha, the other one I saw the other day, Thabo Cephalosha was starting when James Harden was in Oklahoma City. Type of things like that.
Yeah.
If I'm Keldon, I'm just worried about getting the time, and he is.
Yeah, he's getting the time. You know, he's getting those minutes, and he's still getting his numbers. He's still getting paid, probably more importantly for him.
Right.
And
that too.
And so far, at least we're seeing, you know, somewhat of some improvement as far as this team. Now, look, it's still early. You know, the Spurs just recently got stomped by Utah. So, I mean, the jury's still out whether this change is going to happen. But look, Pop did warn everybody after that loss to Utah that if they don't get this consistency down, change is going to happen. So, as far as I think that KJ will continue coming off the bench for the foreseeable future, I'm not going to put it out there that, I'm not going to not be surprised if Keldon is back in the starting lineup moving forward, because right now I think this is just a season of who fits together the best with Wemby. So we'll see, and I think that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I think you will see them. I agree with you. I think at some point you'll see Keldon back in the starting lineup. I mean, you might say it because of injury, but I say this in the context of from a schematic, with the intent of starting him from a schematical view as opposed to necessity because of injury. I think that'll happen again. I think we'll see Keldon. I'm right there with you. Because like you said, they are turning every stone that they can, seeing everything that works for better and for worse. There's been a whole lot more for worse than better this year, but it is what it is, right?
It is what it is. Look, the season's already a wash. Playing ain't going to happen, everybody. Playoffs ain't going to happen at all. It's going to be in the early end of the season once the 82 are done and a long off season again. But there's still some things to be excited about. There's still the trade deadline. There's still that stockpile of picks that they have, first and seconds. Still got a bunch of cash. Still got flippable players, not named Wemby. So I think it can be exciting times. Look, you're just seeing the forging of the new chapter in San Antonio, and this is it. KJ coming off the bench, that's part of it. We'll see if it works. He is Casey Viera. Make sure to follow him on X at Casey_Vieira. Again, the first guest right here on Locked On Spurs for kickoff 2024. And of course, just like old times when we used to do this audio only too. So look at that.
That is true.
That
also
is true.
Yeah.
But again, I know he has to go. He has dad duties, everybody. He has to go check in on baby Carter, so we'll let him go. Casey, what's going on in your neck of the woods over at Ken's?
I was going to say, my dad duties just sleep.
Find any second you can to get some shut-eye.
I know. Did you see I was watching it right now? Very relatable. Recording this on a Thursday night. Apparently Joe Flacco is dozing off on the Browns bench right now. Steve Flacco's out there dominating, and he's currently, we'll just say his eyelids look kind of heavy on the bench. That's like me. That's like me recording right now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's me dominating at life, but dozing off at the same time.
Welcome to fatherhood. I guess that's what.
Welcome, man. It's a beautiful thing.
I bet
the
it
most
is.
Challenging yet beautiful thing I've ever done in my life.
Exactly. Well, I have never experienced that. Maybe one day, look, we're guys, we can experience that anytime at point of our life, but I thought maybe by now.
Man, it is everything as advertised and then some.
Nice. Hey, he is Casey Viera again. Follow him on X at Casey_Vieira. He is the weekend sports anchor for Ken's 5. And we appreciate him coming on as always. Make sure to check out Locked On Spurs wherever you get your favorite podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes. The list goes on and on. Ken's 5 Plus app, probably your best way as well. And we'll be back tomorrow. More silver and black talk. Hopefully we'll talk about more wins, whatever. This season's been kind of up, more downs than up. We want to talk about more ups. Hey, everybody, check out Locked On Sports today at 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube from Locked On Network. We got the local experts, we got the regional shows. It's all there. Locked On Sports today on YouTube, 24/7 streaming channel. Check it out. Go subscribe to it right now. For Casey Viera, I am Jeff Garcia. We're going to put a lock on this episode of Locked On Spurs.